Even if there was definitive proof of God's existence, atheists still wouldn't be Christian.
All right, let's see it.
In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve would walk with God. Obviously, that is undeniable proof that God exists. Would you not agree? And Adam and Eve walked with God, and yet in their pride, they chose not to be with God.
But that's a literary creation. That didn't actually happen. That's just a story that an author told the way they wanted to tell it.
I mean, look at the Israelites. Imagine being in Egypt when God brought those plagues. Imagine being at the Red Sea when it parted. That is undeniable proof that God existed. A pillar of fire appearing out of nowhere. That is undeniable proof that God existed. And what does it say about the nation of Israel? That they complained and they were unbelieving.
There are absolutely no data that support the historicity of any of those events. Those are also literary creations. Those are stories people told the way they wanted to tell them.
If people with undeniable proof of God's existence, still some of them decided not to choose God, then I know that it's not about belief in God. It's about surrender to God.
So 3 things here. First thing, this argument strikes me as having 2 catastrophic flaws. The first being that there's a big difference between saying these groups of people knew for a fact that God existed but still disobeyed God, and these people found out for a fact that God existed and then said nuh-uh anyway. Those are 2 very different events. So you cannot say one would happen because the other has happened. And that raises the second part of the first thing. There are absolutely no data that support the notion that that has ever happened. This argument requires we presuppose the historicity of these literary creations, these stories that came from the minds of authors who were trying to advance their rhetorical literary goals. If they never happened, this isn't evidence of how anyone would actually respond to undeniable, indisputable, objective proof of God's existence. So this argument falls to pieces unless you are willing to presuppose that all of this already happened. In other words, unless you are already willing to presuppose that God exists. So that brings up the second part. This is very clearly not an argument intended for anyone other than people who already agree with this apologetic approach. And it strikes me as rather weak rhetorical prophylaxis for the weakness of the apologetic endeavor, because it seems to me that it is making excuses for why apologists can't seem to convince atheists that God exists and don't seem to have good evidence for it. It's suggesting, hey, it's okay, because even if we had undeniable, indisputable, objective proof of God's existence, atheists would still reject it anyway, because they're just dogmatically committed to being atheists, and nothing could ever convince them otherwise. It's arguing that the game is rigged, that atheists are not arguing in good faith, and that they have no intention of taking any evidence seriously anyway. This strikes me as an attempt to just convince other apologists that it's okay that they don't have evidence or good arguments. Third thing is the fit for this video has been the main man.